Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. Have your head stopped spinning since Tuesday yet? That was a fair bit of information loaded into that one show. It was a long time coming, but I'm glad I delayed it. Initially it was about 23 pages, but the added bits connected more to the dots, so there's always a right time for doing things and not. Anyway, From Russia with Love 8 has started, and we'll see how long that takes. Right, where are we first? We got a fairly packed show. It won't be as perhaps as interesting, or it might be, as Tuesday's show, but we'll see how it goes. First thing I want to correct, there was a couple of people who questioned something that I said last week. I think they misunderstood. Or perhaps it was the way I said it, but about the Fed being owned by Rothschilds. By owned, I meant being ran. As we all know, or our members, regular members know, the Fed is owned by the trust. The Rothschilds just think they own everything, but actually own jack shit. Received I don't know whether it was in the chat or the email now. I haven't had much chance to get to the emails for the past week, so it must have been in the chat. And this is encouraging, and this is, I've said all along, it's not just about me. Everyone has to speak up, and you never know what it changes, what ripples in the pond. Well, here's an example. I noticed a carpet shop opposite where my children go to gymnastics that had the pedophile triangle incorporated into its advertising splashed across its frontage. So I finally plucked up the courage to say something one day and approached the three men standing outside. One was outright rude to me, no surprise. Another, the owner, listened to what I had to say but seemed dubious, and I explained what the symbol meant and walked away. Last week I took my children back to class and the sign had been removed. A small change, but a huge boost to this person's self-confidence, it is said, in living the truth. And that's something we all have a responsibility. We've kept quiet, and because we were ignorant and we weren't aware of certain things for so long. If there's something like that, people have to be told, even if it only makes them aware that you know. That spooks them, you see. But it shows you what can happen if you speak up. I suspect they may have knew what they were doing. It's like the 6-star safe houses for Jews and certain symbols for IRA safe houses in the UK. Their symbolism will be their downfall. Right, let's get into some news and Q&A in the first hour. Then we've got the sub-intel, a bit of intel, and an added piece that was added today. In op-ed, that's going to really expose, kind of adds to From Russia with Love 7, and then we're going to do some exposés again, because certain clowns are deciding to play again, so we'll see. So, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has been ordered by the Democrats to turn over documents relating to the Trump administration dealings with Ukraine this week, accusing others of what they've done. It's just not funny. The examples are increasing by the day. We had someone accusing someone of being a pedophile or being in part of a child porn software ring this week, and yet that person has a pedophile on her friends list. You can't make this stuff up. Anyway, In the letter, the heads of the three houses committees subpoenaed Mr. Pompeo to produce the documents within a week. And this is the latest move in what is becoming a rapidly escalating load of nonsense and impeachment proceedings against Mr. Trump. Now, he has been allegedly scrutinised for pressuring the Ukraine president to investigate Democrat rival Joe Biden. He's also asked the Chinese one as well, because there's fun and games over there. And in a separate development, last Friday, the US Special Envoy for Ukraine negotiations, Kurt Volker, resigned. And Mr. Trump has alleged that Mr. Biden pressed for the sacking of the Ukraine prosecutor Viktor Shokin in 2016 to protect a business that has employed his son, Hunter Biden. He's made millions in Ukraine, courtesy of Langley Clowns. And Mr. Biden called for the sacking of Mr. Shokin, but so did a number of other Western officials, all linked, who saw him as a hindrance to anti-corruption investigations. So Mr. Volker, the State Department's Special Envoy for Ukraine, who got caught in the middle of the pressure campaign by Trump and his lawyer, Mr. Giuliani, to find damaging information about Democrats, abruptly resigned on Friday. And he told the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, he was stepping down, offered no public explanation, but a person informed about his decision said he concluded that it was impossible to be effective in his assignment given the developments of recent days. Now, Mr. Volker was not only involved in the State Department, he was a former ambassador to NATO, who served in a part-time unpaid position of Special Envoy to help Ukraine. I wouldn't say it was help, not their type of help anyway. And Ukraine resolved its armed confrontation with Russian-sponsored separatists, and was among the government officials who found themselves in an awkward position because of the search for dirt on Democrats. And so he went. Good news story, even though it's sad in some ways. Finally, there's a number of these right now in the world that have been fixed and corrected. Nearly 500 men and boys have been rescued from a building in the northern city of Kaduna, where the detainees were allegedly sexually abused and tortured, according to Nigerian police. Children as young as 5 were amongst those in chains at was thought to be an Islamic school. Now, the Kaduna police chief Ali Yanga told the BBC the building was raided after a tip-off about suspicious activity, and he described it as a house of torture and a place of human slavery. 8 suspects, most of them teachers, were arrested, and the police chief said the detainees, some with injuries and starved of food, were overjoyed to be freed. The detainees then told police that they'd been tortured, sexually abused, starved and prevented from leaving, in some cases for several years. Thankfully that's now all over for those people. Also in Africa, and this pleases me no end, the African people are fighting back. Why? Because they've decided that the World Horror Organization, but better known as World Health, which again is a misnomer, the vaccination storage facility at Ayegbaju Market in Osogbo of Osun State was on Saturday razed by fire. This was in Nigeria as well. And according to a Nigerian Security and Civil Defence Corps official, Ajines Alaid, attached to the facility, the fire started from a generator close to the World Health Organization facility. Now, the fire started around 12:13, and one of the generators, it is said, but from what I gather, it was done on purpose, that powers the building where the vaccines were stored. The Osun World Health Organization immunization officer and state cold vaccine coordinator, where did he come up with these names, Mrs. Adebola, told Nigerian agency that the cold vaccine storage office was not affected by the fire, but the dry vaccine outlet was razed. She said a 60k generator, a 12k generator, and 2 other 18 generators were also affected, and 2 photocopying machines and 2 motorcycles were destroyed. But the key part of it is 162,000 of 0.05 mil needles and syringes were destroyed, 634,000 of half millimeter needles and syringes destroyed, 10,500 of 5 milliliter needles destroyed, and 4,000 2 milliliter needles and syringes were destroyed, plus 8,654 pieces of immunization safety boxes were also destroyed. I like that type of thing. I'm sorry, these people are sick, and the more the African people understand what they're doing, the less of them is going to get killed. You know, with shows like mine and Randy's and Alan's and many others who have highlighted this vaccine issue, and this is why they're pushing in the UK now to make it compulsory. The Health Secretary this week said that he's looking very seriously, this is in the UK, at making vaccinations compulsory for all children going to school in England. Simple solution: remove them. Give the Education Department a £1 billion indemnity form, that they're liable if your child gets sick. See if they sign it. They don't sign it. If they can't sign it and declare it safe, then you have a right not to give it. It's that simple. Some experts have suggested it may be necessary to address falling rates of immunisation, good to hear, and a surge in diseases which is faked, like measles. Matt Hancock told an event at the Tory conference that he had taken legal advice this week on how to go about it. And unvaccinated children were putting other children at risk. I love the way he put that. The vaccinated children have the virus in them, and they're safe, but the ones with no virus in them are not. You make sense of that? You know. And the uptake of MMR vaccine in particular has been declining in many countries, and the reason is not clear. I'll tell you what's clear is people think it's all BS, that's why. And too many people's kids have suffered because of it. Rates dipped in the 1990s following publication of a report linking MMR to autism. It also causes deafness in the ear close to where the vaccine was given. Happened to my ex-wife. And that was the first part of there's 2 parts. That was just the first part. We didn't have the second. But partially recovered after that research was discredited and disproved, probably by Snopes, CIA, you know, or Facebook fact checker. Yeah, they need to check their own facts. However, the volume of anti-vaccine sentiment on social media has been swelling, and in March the head of the NHS in England warned vaccination deniers were gaining traction online, which is why YouTube and Go Ogle and others are closing all those sites down. So it's up to us then to give word of mouth. You saw what happened in the first piece tonight. Make people aware. It's their choice then. Another good piece of news, this time in Indonesia. The Indonesian Parliament has unanimously agreed to raise the legal minimum age at which girls can marry to 19 last week. And the move comes after decades of campaigning and will help to advance gender equality and close legal loopholes that have enabled issue of child marriage to remain pervasive in the country. Finally, after 45 years of the existing marriage law, this is present for Indonesian children. Women's Empowerment and Child Protection Minister Yohana Yambisi said in a statement this week. Though the legal marriage age for both men and women is officially 21, numerous loopholes have allowed girls as young as 16 and lower, and men as young as 19 to marry with parental consent. I don't think it's anything near those ages. Some in those type of countries, they're marrying them at 9 and 12. And the law also allowed girls of any age to be married off with permission from local authorities and religious courts. Indonesia has the 8th highest number of child brides in the world, with 14% of girls married before 18 and more than 3 million before 15. According to UNICEF. Well, what are they doing? They're supposed to be protecting children. What are they doing? And the minister pointed out that child marriage in the country had been linked to higher rates of maternal and infant deaths as well as child labour. Yes, because they're too young is why. Republican Representative Chris Collins of New York, accused of insider trading, has resigned. A spokesman for House Speaker and alcoholic Nancy Pelosi confirmed on Monday. We are in receipt of a letter of resignation and it will be laid down to the House floor this week pro forma, and resignation will be effective. Now, Mr. Collins, who's from upstate New York, represented the swathe of suburbs between Buffalo and Rochester and was the first US congressman to endorse President Trump's candidacy, and he also remained a staunch Trump ally. Last September, after Collins and another GOP congressman faced federal charges, Trump tweeted 2 long-running Obama-era investigations of 2 very popular Republican congressmen were brought to a well-publicised charge just ahead of the midterms by Jeff Sessions. And he went on to criticise Mr. Sessions, who has since been resigned, spelled F-I-R-E-D. Spain next. I find this mind-boggling after all this time. But this is the way bureaucracy works. And all part of the labels and tick boxes culture. But there was a deadline for Jewish people living outside of Spain to request Spanish nationality has now expired, with 127,000 applications, most of them from Latin America. Jews living in Mexico topped the list with about 20,000 requests, followed by Jews in Venezuela and also Colombia. Back in 2015, Spain passed a law to atone for the medieval expulsion of the Sephardi Jews from the country in the 15th century. Spain's Catholic monarchs, having defeated the Muslim Moors, forced Jews to convert or leave, and applicants have had to prove a family connection with medieval Spain, and in many cases that proved difficult, which they will know ahead of time. In addition, they had to get their Sephardi origins certified by a solicitor in Spain, and Spanish Jews gave the Hebrew name Separad to the Iberian Peninsula, so descendants of Jews from Spain and Portugal who still describe themselves as Sephardi Jews. 127 an Elbard, 1,000 an Elbard. Unbelievable. This could get interesting. Leaked audio comments this week from Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, spelled with a silent F, reportedly included him saying that the tech company would likely have no choice but to sue the US government to stave off being broken up if Elizabeth Warren becomes president. He said, "You have someone like Elizabeth Warren thinks that the right answer is to break up the companies. I mean, if she gets elected president, then I would bet that we will have a legal challenge, and I would bet that we would win the legal challenge." It was quoted in saying in 2 Q&A sessions with Facebook employees recently. Well, didn't Trump mention over breaking them up? So why is he not suing it now? This next piece boggles my mind and makes me want to get my MeWe GIF out again. It's just staggering. Bernie Sanders, you'd be better selling chicken. And kickstarts the third quarter fundraising announcement. It announced the Vermont Senators campaign on Tuesday announced that they'd raised a whopping $25.3 million in the last 3 months. The largest quarter for any Democratic candidate this year, and a number that on its own eclipses Elizabeth Warren's entire first and second quarters total. 25 million in 3 months for a pointless politician. I mean, what's wrong with people in this country? There's plenty of ways and places to send $8.5 million a month than on a 79-year-old politician who's never ever going to win. It's madness. $8.5 million a month for people who talk shit and deliver nothing. Reports out this week, and not a surprise. And we did warn of it, but warnings seem to go unhindered to date anyway, although there has been a slight change. But the American manufacturers are sliding deeper into recession. A closely watched gauge of factory activity released this week registered its weakest reading in more than 10 years. And the monthly survey for the Institute for Supply Management, an association of purchasing managers, showed that the sector, which accounts for roughly 12% of US gross domestic product in September, shrank to its lowest level since June 2009. Also, there came out manufacturers are also adding fewer jobs and shedding quite a lot. I was going to put this in the sub-intro as a hint, but it's left in the news. This is the last one before we go into some Q&A. But police in Germany have executed a high-tech raid. Listen closely. On a data processing centre installed in an NATO bunker, which allegedly hosted dark web sites to deal drugs and child abuse imagery. Authorities reportedly seized $41 million worth of funds seemingly linked to these markets, and over 200 servers which were running throughout the closely guarded facility. 7 people have been arrested, and the main suspect in the long-running investigation is a 59-year-old Dutchman who police believe bought the former military bunker in Traben-Trarbach, which is in western Germany. And after he acquired the bunker from NATO, or did he? The man allegedly transformed it into a large and heavily secured data processing centre in order to make it available to clients, according to the investigations, exclusively for illegal purposes. Now, the regional criminal police chief Johannes Kunz noted the man is believed to have had links to organised crime. Well, he would. It was a NATO bunker. They are organised crime. And he also appeared to spend most of his time in the area despite being registered as a resident in Singapore. Connecting dots here. And authorities are investigating a total of 13 people aged 20 to 59, including 3 Germans and 7 Dutch citizens. Those arrested are suspected of being members of a criminal organisation, as well as accessories to hundreds of thousands of offences involving forged documents, counterfeit money, drugs, and the distribution of child abuse imagery. And the bunker was set up as a bulletproof hoster in a bid to conceal illicit activities, and it's thought to have hosted platforms including drug dealing site Cannabis Road, Wall Street Market, and Orange Chemicals. Such dark web marketplaces are often run and fueled by cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. That's Mr. Brower stated, and it said it appeared that a 2016 botnet attack on Deutsche Telekom, which affected about 1 million customers' routers, came from that bunker. Did you connect the dots in there? I hope you did. Right, let's see if we can get through some Q&As. I managed to work through the backlog, so we're fairly up to date. How do you keep balanced and healthy, reporting all the low vibrational negative insanity in politics? Well, I practice what I preach. The 45-55 works. People who have been with me or been close to me know I don't swing too far one way or too far the other. It's quite easy. And it's a testament to all members, not just me. Yes, I hear a lot more. You get the condensed version of the sin eating in many ways. But it's a testimony to us all that we're all reasonably sane, given the volumes. It's not just my show. There's many other shows that cover stuff, given the volumes of information that we've had to consume, and most of it's not pleasant, as we all know. And the only way you can do that is by staying in the 45-55. One of the biggest tests was the Illuminati One show. Boy, did that tip people over the edge. It wasn't a pleasant show to speak or read out, given that level of torture and violence and abuse on children, even given the fact that it was largely Illuminati children. It makes no difference to me, you know. And you do have to retain a balance. It can be difficult at times, you know, some of the things that the clowns do, you know, but at least they've got a purpose. You know, you've got lower level puppet clowns in the alt media who have zero purpose and zero life. Why are they doing it? You know? And sometimes that can be mildly annoying, but most times I just laugh at it because it's ridiculous, you know. And that comes with mastering the self. And we've covered, you know, psychology a lot in the shows about mastery of the self, mastery of the emotions. You know, without that, then you're going to struggle with the 45-55. And that's where you gain control. You know, don't let other people dictate your mood. Don't let information dictate your mood either. You know, it's there to process and absorb and then go through it. And you do it in a balanced way. It can't get you too angry, and it can't, you know, get you overexcited, because either end of the spectrum is not good, because it takes a while to come down. So if you react to bad news and you go 45, you've only got a 5% correction. A lot easier than 30 or 40%. You know, it's the same example as when the drug takers, they go on a high. So they're going pretty much 90-10 or 100-0. And then what happens? They don't go back to balance, they go back to the bottom. And so then they need more to pick them back up. And they're swinging 90-10, 10-90. You can't live life like that. That's why drug addicts struggle. They've got no balance. So that's the key. You know, politics is a joke anyway. We've all seen that now. The evidence of that. People don't need me to tell you that politics is staged and drama laden. Because no one discusses the policies. You know, I was talking to Holly today. Why vote for anyone? Not one politician has discussed the policies. That's what they're supposed to be there for. The same as the portal people. They don't discuss policies. They discuss personalities. Well, personalities don't matter. It's what are they doing that counts. So that's how I keep balanced. Sometimes it's a little bit more testy. More so when general people mess about. I just can't get my head around it. You know, more so than the clowns. They have a purpose. You know, they want to bring us down. What is the people's purpose? Ridiculous. Previously said that the IRS were denied access to their main computers and that all contents were downloaded elsewhere for analysis and auditing. What has come of this? I could say not a lot, and I could say quite a lot in the same thing. They are certainly not able to backdoor people's bank accounts currently, and that will not be returning. They have no need to gain access to anyone's bank account, and they are certainly blocked from transferring funds out of the IRS to Swiss banks and Rothschild banks anymore. So a lot that has been achieved. What we would have liked is for it to be reformed. You know, we did a whole package of how to reform it and how the country can become self-sufficient within 3 to 5 years, whereby it doesn't need to trust, you know, the actual taxes being collected and being used for the government, not for Rothschilds, would make a vast difference, which then means that the country doesn't have to borrow 40%. 4 out of every $10 is borrowed currently. Why? Because the IRS takes all the taxes, or the income tax anyway. Are tax revenues in all countries being retrieved from Swiss accounts and held safe and temporarily in the trust? Not to my knowledge. I just don't know. Sorry. I would like to know with what set of government of Austria Kim talked to. I don't recall her speaking to the Austrian. I could be wrong. No, she speaks to many people globally. I'm not always there when she's on calls, but I could always ask. It's changing so quick, and as I know, the president was a member of a secret brotherhood, and I'm sure he's not the only one. Not in Austria, no. No. Land of the Habsburgs. Where are we next? Are the Australian Aboriginals any closer to clarity the real Kim? Not really understanding that question. I don't know what you mean by the real Kim. As regards the Australian Aboriginals any closer to knowing the truth, then the answer would be no. Some of them, along with agents who we threw out of our group, are feeding the Australian people, tribal people, a whole pack of lies. And it's new boss, same as the old boss with Jesper and the Kingdom of Mana crew. You know, we did try to tell them, but they're pursuing another one of the chosen ones and fake ancient tribes of Israel, and they're descendants of Solomon, really. So you're all child sacrifices then. You know, we're going to see further examples in the show of this, people putting themselves up as something more than they are. I don't care what people want to call themselves, but at least act in the role. You know, if you're going to call yourself, I'm the reincarnation of Jesus, at least act like him. You know, since when would Jesus chase after RVs, or Mary Magdalene for that matter? It makes no sense. And that's the problem. You've got a small group of people who think they're more important than everybody else. You know, I would sooner they do something important than everybody else than be. That's ego. So I hope that answers the question. Is the AI now defeated? The original psychotic one? Yes. Can you please tell us things that have been done and dusted, taken down or cleared up that have been concluded? They get stated when safe to do so. So if it's safe to do it today, then more will come out. If not, it won't. Perhaps it would be better, I know you're a fairly new member, is to find the events piece. Tells you all on there. Do you think this administration will ever implement the plans of the Mana World Holding Trust? Good question. It's, I would describe it as a bit hit and miss. That's my opinion only. it's a bit hit and miss. There seems to be a large interest in it, and yet when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, things seem to go a bit sideways or get delayed. I don't think this country can afford too many more delays. Actions have to be taken, and fairly soon, before this country completely collapses. There's nothing left. The manufacturing's going, the jobs are going, the housing market's starting to collapse, the price of food is going up, the price of gas is going up, and people are losing jobs. Despite what fake financial experts tell you. Even the stock market this week has lost 1,000 points in the last 3 days. If there's nothing there, then chaos reigns. And that's what Kim has tried to do for the last 2 or 3 years, is to avoid chaos. Some people have said, don't pay the government anything. Well, you're talking about, by not paying the government, you're talking about affecting 75 to 100 million people by not paying the government. That's just straight off the bat. There's always add-ons because of that. There's 25 million people employed by the government. It's the highest salary in the world by far. Well, when you consider, say, every family has got a family of 4, or 3 or 4, you're not just affecting 25 million people, you're affecting 75 to 100 million people, who then have no money to pay for X, Y, and Z, which then means other people are then laid off because no one's buying their goods, because no one's being paid. These are the things at that level you have to take into account. I understand people saying don't give the money, government money, they only waste it. But what has been done and being made clear is the funds that are being sent covers wages only and minor operating costs. No giant budgets for military to waste so they can push it out the back door and send it to fake Chinese elders. That stopped. So I hope, in my opinion, I said it recently in the show, unless Trump implements some of the actions and packages prepared for him by next November, I don't think he's going to get in again. So it's his choice. He can arse around waiting for Israel to do something, or you can wait another 10 years for Chinese elders to do nothing, or you can have what's on the table already. It's up to him. But if he doesn't, this country's going to collapse and he will not get voted in again. Thomas, I would like you to have a live Q&A show. Have you ever considered this? Well, I did a few of those type of Zooms. My time is not as free as it was for certain things, and other times it is. There's a lot of members who don't like the Q&A. So, doing a whole Q&A live, it doesn't make much difference to me, because I'll always answer the questions, no matter what I'm asked. Even though we get accused of not answering questions, and yet we're the only show that has a Q&A section. That bizarre world they live in. Maybe. If members would like it, then I would consider it. But I think you'll find that most won't. Many who are aware have been so from birth, to some degree at least. Does this mean that the soul knew to expect in this lifetime, what to expect in this lifetime? Has it intentionally chosen to incarnate at this time? Yes. to the latter question. My understanding is far too many people, 85%, are either not real or too damaged. And the ones that were left were also damaged. And it couldn't be fixed from the inside, and could only be fixed by souls coming in from the outside, which is what happened in the last 60 years. What defines an original human and human soul? Not really understanding that question. A while ago, it was said that petrol will come down in price to 60 cents. Any more news on that? Good question. I think it was Kim that mentioned that. The issue is they're deliberately inflating the prices, A, to keep cash flow going, and B, they're still playing the oil currency game, because all the other currency games have pretty much been written off now or failed. And this is why he wants to go into Iraq, Iran, and all the other oil countries, Venezuela, you name it, and so they can collect enough oil to then leverage as an oil-backed currency, which failed also. And so the prices are still being stacked, but it shouldn't be anywhere near $2, $3, or $4 when it costs, I think, if memory serves me correctly, about 7 cents a gallon. Oops. To produce. We're being robbed. You said we would see a visible change in the moon. It's still there. Look on the right hand side, down the right hand side towards the top. Since we are deprogramming, will we naturally connect with the quantum system? In what way? A bit vague on that question. There's very few who are capable of being able to operate or work with the quantum system. Now, technically everyone's connected to it, because everyone's mapped. Not only on this planet, but millions of other planets as well. But it's not only for this planet and solar system, it goes multiverse. Final question before we have a music break. Given that Pompeo, Bear and Durham were reportedly in Italy when the Vatican was raided for financial reasons, why was the trio there? I don't know, sorry. I haven't managed to check up on what they've been doing. Worlds of politics. Skullduggery, I've no doubt. Or maybe they're going to arrest people, who knows. Do the trio know about Manor World Holding Trust? Pompeo does, that's a certainty, given what he's connected to. Right, let's have a music break, and we'll be back shortly with some more news. Hi all, and welcome back to the sub-Intel and the Intel portion. We're going to have a laugh with that. Subintel. Is this another of the Bush-Clinton death trail? Question mark. The US diplomat Joseph Wilson, who defied President George W. Bush over the decision to go to war with Iraq, has died this week, aged 69. Now, in 2003, Mr. Wilson disproved allegations used by the Bush administration as grounds for invasion that then Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein had built uranium in Niger. No, the Brits were selling that for a start, and all kinds of other weaponry. What you got to remember is they were given, and both America and Britain were given Saddam Hussein weapons to fight Iran. So that's how they deliberately set them up. They'll start off with one thing. Essentially, the US military wanted to go into Iraq and Iran over the oil and other resources there. Now, days later, his then wife Valerie Plame, remember her, was outed as a CIA agent in what some saw as an act of political revenge. He and Ms. Plame later divorced in 2017, and she told the Washington Post that her ex-husband had died of organ failure in a hospice in New Mexico where they both lived. 69. Now, as an acting ambassador to Iraq in the run-up to the first Gulf War in 1991, he was the last US diplomat to meet Saddam Hussein. And in 2002, by then a private citizen, Mr. Wilson was sent by the CIA on a fact-finding mission to Niger to investigate reports that Iraq had bought a nuclear material, uranium yellowcake, which the Brits had sent in. Now, Mr. Wilson concluded that the reports were false, but 11 months later they reappeared on Bush's State of the Union address. Why? Because the Bush family ran the CIA and they wanted to collect more oil, as you now all know. You know, this type of skullduggery, we've covered some from Russia with Love, 7 this week, but also the fact that Israel, with dual citizen Americans, gave Iran nuclear weapons in 1984. And this is how they work. They give Saddam Hussein loads of weapons to fight Iran. They also give Osama bin Laden, who was a CIA agent, weapons to fight Russia in Afghanistan. Then they decide to turn on them. But it's all fake. It was nothing to do with Hussein and nothing to do with Osama bin Laden either. It's just expansion. And the sooner people see through that illusion, the better. Now, they were used as evidence that Iraq was obtaining weapons of mass destruction and justification for the 2003 war. And in July of that year, the former diplomat wrote in the New York Times, "I have little choice but to conclude that some of the intelligence," misnomer that, "related to Iraq's nuclear weapons program was twisted to exaggerate the Iraqi threat." And the following week, conservative columnist Robert Novak reported that part of the reason Mr. Wilson had been given the Niger mission was that his wife, a CIA agent, recommended him. All jobs for the boys and girls, you see. And Ms. Plame, whose work required secrecy, was forced to resign from the service after she was outed. Like I said, an act of revenge against Mr. Wilson by not the Bush administration, but they were being ran by Cheney and Langley. And like I said, the show on Tuesday uncovered that they're involved in world issues far more than people realise. The CIA I'm talking about. And I'm hoping this government reins them in. We have to. Because it would be on real grounds, not fake, real grounds for national security to rein them in. They need to be reined in. Cut their funding. Fox News radio host and commentator Todd Starnes has been ousted from the network this week, and his website, contract and premium subscription service Fox Nation, the company notified the news on yesterday. He made headlines as recently as Monday for comments during his radio program that the Democrats do not believe in the Christian God and instead worship Moloch, a pagan god, it is stated, often associated with child sacrifice. And Fox confirmed yesterday that Starnes is no longer working at the network, but did not elaborate on the reasons behind his departure. I wonder if Mr. Starnes listens to THI. It's not often a politician comes out with stuff like that, alt media stuff. And we've covered the Moloch story and the owl quite extensively. I'm not the only one, but it is perhaps more recent. But the only problem Mr. Starnes has is it applies to both parties, not just the Democrats. Both are involved in it, not just one. Now, the reason it is an owl that they worship is the Egyptian word for owl is Moloch. The symbolism and word magic is being unwound. More banking fraud. I expect this to increase, as we seem to be covering it each week now, which is not a surprise. Mexican authorities are investigating a massive fraud scheme involving a bank that is widely used by American retirees who have moved to Mexico. And according to officials with Monex, say that about $40 million has been reported missing from 158 accounts. I told you they'd start stealing from people's accounts. One couple who was scammed out of their life savings shared their story with NBC this week. Kathy and Jim Mejia retired and moved from San Diego to San Miguel de Allende, which is a small mountain town about 4 hours northwest of Mexico City. And the Mejias worked with Marcela Zavella Taylor, a former banker with Grupo Financiero Monex, to deposit their funds into the bank account. And the couple says Taylor was always responsive when they needed money. She would either have the funds wired to them or would dispatch her assistant to deliver an envelope filled with pesos. But in December, the Mejias needed money to pay their contractors and contacted Taylor, but this time they didn't hear back from her and contacted Monex. And the bank told them their money was gone and they had just a few pesos left in their account. She said it gives you a sense of ultimate betrayal, loss and horror. And dozens of people then came forward and said they were scammed out of money by Taylor and Monex, and they had no idea their accounts were empty because they kept receiving fraudulent statements from the bank. Now, the bank apparently is working with retirees and has offered to reimburse them if they press charges with the Procuraduría General de Justicia in Mexico City and name Taylor in their complaint. In other words, don't blame the bank. And legal action is continuing in the case and details cannot be disclosed as to not hinder the investigation. And the bank is working with clients and has settled with 70%, not 100%, 70%, just like that. You know. As mentioned earlier, rising home prices coupled with conservative borrowing have today's homeowners sitting on a record amount of potential cash, and they're going to seduce people to create more. Don't do it. Keep your equity. Don't do it. This is how they wrap people in, because there is another crash going to come, and the interest rate will go up should that happen. A huge amount. And this is what they did in 2005, 6 and 7. You've got some capital, let's give you some of that capital, and all these fancy seducement advertisements, and people go, woo, yeah, we'll get 20, 30, 40,000 and we'll buy a car, go on a vacation, and then boom, becomes bust. And this is what they're pushing you with now. Today's mortgage holders saw their home equity increase by 4.8% annually at the end of the second quarter, and this is a collective gain of nearly 428 billion. So you see why they're asking people to borrow some of that, because of course they then claim 9 times the amount that you borrow. Let's not do that. Break it down by borrower, and the average homeowner with a mortgage gained $4,900 in home equity in just 1 year. Didn't tell you what they lost the previous decade, did they? Borrower equity rose to an all-time high in the first half of 2019 and more than doubled since the housing recovery started. Combined with low mortgage rates, this rise in home equity supports spending on home improvements and may help improve balance sheets of households who could take out home equity loans to consolidate their debt. No, don't do it. This is a report of refugees. Again, fairly staggering. And again, statistics are not what you were led to believe. More than 35,000 people were forced to flee their homes every single day in 2018. 1 every 2 seconds. And we're complaining in the Western world of our problems. Taking the world's displaced population now to a record 71 million, which is more than the whole population of the UK. A total of 26 million have fled across borders. 41 million are displaced within their home countries, and 3.5 million have sought asylum, the highest number ever. And why are so many people being driven away from their families, friends and neighbourhoods? Wars have contributed to the highest rise. Conflict and violence, persecution and human rights violations are driving more and more men, women and children from their homes. In fact, the number of displaced people has doubled in the last 10 years, with wars in Iraq, Syria and other regions causing many families to leave their communities. Also conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Yemen and South Sudan, as well as the flow of Rohingya refugees from Myanmar and to Bangladesh, have also had a similar and significant impact. Now, contrary to Portal People opinions about refugees, 4 out of 5 would prefer to stay in their own country. In fact, it's a bit higher than 4 out of 5. Just over 90% would rather live in their own country and not to be sent to far foreign lands. as covers for other rogue elements to install themselves into the theatre of operations. Hope you understand what I just said, because that's what's going on. Jakobshavn Glacier in Western Greenland is notorious for being the world's fastest moving glacier. It's also one of the most active, discharging a tremendous amount of ice from the Greenland ice sheet into Ilulissat Ice Fjord and adjacent Disko Bay, with implications for alleged sea level rise. And the image shows that was acquired on June the 6th this year by the operational land imager, shows a natural colour view of the glacier, and they've spent decades in retreat. That is, until scientists observed an unexpected advance of the glacier starting in 2016. It's near quadrupled on the one photograph that I saw. In addition to growing towards the ocean, the glacier was found to be slowing and also thickening. Oops. And new data collected in March 2019 confirmed that the glacier has grown for the third year in a row, and scientists attribute the change to cool ocean waters. But I thought everything was getting hotter. And they also reported for the third straight year that the glacier was thickening. And they're now saying they come to the conclusion that the ocean is the culprit. Well, it makes a change from people. What are we going to have next? An ocean tax. I wouldn't rule it out. As predicted, though, everything is moving away from the traditional sites of glaciers and ice packs into new regions. This is what's taking place. Climate change, my ass. No, it's natural planetary change. Listen closely. To accommodate movement of the planet towards being back on its axis. The Trump White House announced they had to upgrade the security of National Security Council's top secret code word system in the spring of 2018. This was released this week. I remember mentioning it on the show. According to two former Trump White House officials familiar with the matter, as part of an effort, it was said, to ferret out and deter leaks. And the changes included a new log of who accessed specific documents in the NSC system known as NIS, or NSC, Intelligence Collaboration Environment, and was designed in part to prevent leaks of records of the president's phone calls with foreign leaders and to find out the suspected leaker if transcripts did get disclosed. Prior to the upgrade, officials could only see who had uploaded or downloaded material to the system, but usually not who accessed which documents. For those of you with long memories, that was in the Intel early last year. You all know how it came about, and you all know who was involved in it. Last sub-Intel piece, another positive news. There's awful lot going on in the background to do with trafficking, drugs, Bitcoin server, fake accounts, and also genetic issues. And they finally released some of it, of what's been going on. The US federal agents raided genetic testing laboratories this week, and 35 people were criminally charged in 4 states in a crackdown on genetic testing fraud that officials said on Friday caused $2.1 billion in losses to federal healthcare insurance programs. That's not the only reason. And the use of genetic testing, which helps people determine their risks of developing cancer and other diseases, according to them, has skyrocketed in the US since the 2015. For Medicare, the public insurance program for elderly and disabled Americans, payouts for genetic tests jumped from $480 million in 2015 to $1.1 billion in 2018. Another racketeering scam. And genetic testing sparked more than 300 federal investigations involving healthcare fraud and illegal kickbacks. But many of the lab tests are not relevant to the patient's history, and some of the doctors sign off on the results without conferring with the patient, investigators say. That's another giant racket that has to be stripped down and started again. The whole health industry is beyond a joke in this country. Intel. I'm glad people have noticed the disappearing of the humming noise since we mentioned in the Intel that certain machines have been destroyed. More have followed. And things also feel a bit lighter as well. Or it should do. Now, following previous discussions with the Fed last week, which was mentioned in the Intel, negotiations with the Fed and also JP Morgan were ongoing over the weekend after they cancelled a deal at the very last minute on Friday. No doubt waiting for the RV on Monday again. Now the deal was to band-aid banks. That's all. Until November. There was a date in the middle of November. And it wasn't to liquidate them at all, but to bring them back to zero. The deal was also to provide funding for essential government-based items like operating costs and wages only, again until the middle of November only. And the conditions of the deal were based on set conditions that were laid out by the trust and deliverance of the fees. No fees, no money. And what has also been said, given the revelations that Mr. Powell, the Federal Reserve Chairman of New York, is now aware of, which quite frankly staggers me. Mr. Powell is taking an active interest, a real active interest, so we see whether that brings any changes. But what was also stated is during this time period there will be no contracts, decisions made on any financial levels involving the Federal Reserve, any banks or the Treasury without prior approval of the President. Stamping down. New talks, another one of the conditions between now and the middle of November is new talks will take place amongst the aforementioned parties that will include the Manor World Holding Trust and discuss a way forward at the revelations made by the Trust to the Federal Reserve New York branch, who appear oblivious to the fact that the Fed has no license to operate and was being operated in the background by the Rothschilds, who think they own it when it belongs to the trust. So at least there is some negotiations going on. I appreciate some will go, why are you talking to the Fed? Well, as the trustee, it came as an obligation to talk to all groups. You know, you can't as the trustee, you can't pick and choose. Who knows? Maybe they might fly straight. Maybe pigs might fly. Who knows? You've got to find out. And we'll find out fairly quickly. One of the, if you thought last week's Intel staggered you at the lack of knowledge, I can't say too much, but I can just give the basic outlines. Kimberley requested a task to be done at a major department this week. Now, that particular department is involved in that task that was requested. And then they came back and says no one in the building could carry out that simple request or task. Oh dear. It's utterly staggering, the lack of basic skills in so-called major departments in this country. You have no idea of how bad it is. And there is going to require much retraining of all staff on all levels going forward. You have no idea of what they don't know and what they can't do. Unbelievable. Attempts to initiate Solomon's demons and build the third, what is actually the fourth temple, will be stopped. I'll have more on that later. Following the discussions on Monday to do with the Fed and JP Morgan in particular, a banker at JP Morgan was arrested on Tuesday on 16 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. And further arrests in other banking establishments have followed. None have made the news yet. And then today we had clownery. There's a new word for you, or fuckery, either way. With their new system, the new system, the new quantum system that they're putting out. They tried to attach it to the quantum system, the real one, the only one, and it was removed from attaching to the system and crashed their new system in minutes. Oops. These people just won't learn. I've no doubt Cobra will be out tonight or tomorrow stating 3 or 4 letters of code as crashed or aborted. He often does that. Then you find out who he's working for. And this is the quantum system that everyone's talking about in the alt media. But it's way beyond quantum. Way beyond. So, you know, it's all a ruse from the start. We've got the quantum system, and everyone writes was spitting it out months ago. It's rubbish. Now, the clowns tried to convince the Fed that their system is too corrupted. Why? Because they've been using it and ushered in a new system that is even weaker than the original one, and tried to attach to the trust system and steal everything, and the whole lot crashed, including the Fed. Oops. Now what? Right, Patterson and the SSP will have to build a new quantum system now. Final Intel piece. You're going to laugh at this. And I'm going to use a word that some members like. hearing me say, so you'll be pleased with this, because I'm going to say it about 10 times. Having failed in attempts to declare Kim is dead recently, the latest bullshit from the clowns is that Kim is a man. The desperate. How desperate are these people getting? You know, it's beyond a joke. They tried to dig up dirt on her and us. It failed. Deny the trust exists. Failed. She's not the trustee. Failed. She can't transfer funds. Failed. Bribe us to step down. Failed. Tried to assassinate Kim and the team. Failed. We're going to be arrested by the FBI and the CIA. Failed. Kim is dead. Failed. Kim is a man. Epic fail. Trying to get us to quit. Failed. Have a nice day. Hi all and welcome back. Op-ed pieces. I've been meaning to do this for a few weeks now, and in light of the show on Tuesday and a current global mind control program being fronted by some child from Sweden who is miraculously allowed to skip school, travel the world, talk at high-end events with no backing, we are led to believe, like that ever happens, called Greta Thunberg. So here is a document from 1960 from Langley's own files that tells you all you need to know about climate change. You know, to think this was in planning 60 years ago, next year, should alert you to the advancements made in that time. Introduction. Control of the weather environment involves the complete spectrum of weather phenomena as a function of the time and space scale associated with such weather phenomena. Different types of human activities are affected, ranging from those of the individuals through the complex operation of large industrial and military organizations and the activities of entire societies. The concept of weather control has meaning only when it's discussed in terms of the specific operations for which it is to be used. 1960. The techniques which are and can be used for control of the weather environment vary with the scale of the operation considered and with the specific goals which are to be achieved by such weather control. Large-scale climate control requires the modification of the global weather patterns by altering and interfering with the large-scale physical processes which are associated with the characteristic motions of the scale of the general circulation of the atmosphere. Many proposals have been made regarding means of altering the various physical processes in the atmosphere which might affect these large-scale atmospheric circulations. This is the trade winds and all that type. Most of these proposals have never been subjected to detailed scientific feasibility analysis. There you go again. What they've already said there is they're already doing it, and yet they've made no scientific tests of the implications of it. These proposals fall into several general categories. In general, they are categorized by whether they seek to alter processes associated with the energy and momentum of moisture balance of the atmosphere. For example, proposals have been made to alter the energy balance of large areas by altering the surface albedo. Proposals of this nature involve changing surface albedos by the use of substances of appropriate absorptive and reflective characteristics which differ from the natural surface. An example is the proposal that polar areas be covered with layers of soot. Yes, they've been doing that. Other proposals are made to alter the energy balance of the atmosphere by injecting dust and other particulate matter into the high atmosphere, which might alter the input of solar energy to the atmosphere. Chemtrails. Proposals for altering the normal energy cycle of the atmosphere extend also to the alteration of the chemistry of the atmospheric substances, especially in the high atmosphere, which might also affect the radiational balance. In other words, they were messing with the upper atmosphere. Remember all the fuss in the 70s about the ozone, and 80s, the ozone layer disappearing? There's your answer. Proposals are made to alter the moisture balance of the atmosphere by the alteration of the evaporation mechanisms. These proposals suggest spreading various kinds of film upon large bodies of water, thus cutting down evaporation, in other words causing drought, and interfering with the moisture cycle of the atmosphere. Furthermore, when films are spread upon surfaces to alter their evaporation potential, the mechanical effects of the surface are also altered, which might affect the momentum balance of the atmosphere. Proposals are also made for altering the momentum balance of the atmosphere. These proposals generally involve a modification of the surface frictional stresses. That's the fault lines. By changing the frictional drag coefficients over large areas of surface. Technological developments of the past 2 decades have provided the understanding, the techniques and the means necessary for an assault on the problems of climate control. Control of any kind requires capabilities in all 3 of these areas. Meteorology is just now beginning to acquire such capabilities. Achievement of an understanding of the large-scale physical processes of the atmosphere has been a continuing process over many decades. However, during the past several years, the systematic exploitation of observational information on a global scale has led to a coherent description of the manner in which the large-scale physical processes in the atmosphere operate to provide for the maintenance of the global circulations against the dissipative effects of friction, and the manner in which they operate to transform the solar energy into kinetic energy of the organised large-scale atmospheric circulations. Theoretical studies have led to an understanding of the reasons why the atmospheric physical processes operate in the observed manner. In combination, these studies have led to the formation of the first consistent rudimentary theories for the causes of the fluctuation of the large-scale atmospheric circulations. The attainment of such a theory holds broad implications for the manner in which climate control studies can be conducted. Much as the biologist must first achieve an understanding of the causes and processes involved in the generation and communication of diseases before he can consider the problem of disease control. So meteorologists must achieve an understanding of the causes and processes involved in the fluctuations of the atmospheric circulations which control the regional and global climate. While the meteorologist's understanding is by no means perfect and much remains to be done, at least the first and most necessary level of understanding has been reached. Given such understanding, the meteorologist must have the capability of simulating and testing the natural phenomena he must control. In other physical sciences, this is a relatively straightforward matter of laboratory simulation. The circulation phenomena of relevance in global climate are not so readily amenable to laboratory simulation. So in other words, they live tested. Fortunately, simple models of the atmospheric circulations of a mathematical nature can and have been intensively studied by meteorologists in connection with the theatrical studies of the general circulation and in connection with the problems of numerical weather forecasting. That's called guessing. The indispensable tool which has generated such intensive interest in such mathematical formulations of atmospheric models has been the high-speed electronic computer, 1960, which has become the laboratory of the meteorologists. Rapid technological advances in the data processing and computer art now make it feasible to consider the treatment of simple mathematical models of the atmosphere of considerable sophistication in which important physical processes can be simulated. Such computing machines now place the meteorologist in the enviable position of other scientists in that the effects of various physical processes can be studied under controlled conditions. It has now become feasible not only to speculate about consequences of human intervention in the atmospheric processes. It's not us that's interfering, it's them. But also simulate, test and study these consequences. The meteorologist has also attempted to imitate his more fortunate scientific brethren by constructing laboratory models of large-scale atmospheric and also oceanic circulations. And he messed with the oceans and he messed with the air. He has been able to attain considerable success in producing reasonable hydrodynamic analogues of these large-scale atmospheric motions, which are amenable to study under controlled laboratory conditions. The second tool for simulation and testing purposes provides the meteorologist with another indispensable capability which was unavailable just a decade ago. Much of the well-justified scepticism about the feasibility of climate control has centred on the available human means for exercising necessary control. All there in one sentence. While there are many conceivable methods for control of climate, all of them involve the expenditure of energy in one form or another. Even the vulnerable instabilities of the atmosphere, which one would hope to uncover through a systematic programme of climate control studies, the so-called trigger mechanisms, nice MK Ultra term that, will probably require access to energy sources of immense magnitude for proper exploitation. In this atomic age, we now have available truly immense potential sources of power, and it's highly likely that our lifetime will see the harnessing of hydrogen fusion power, which will provide almost limitless sources of energy. 1960, they were talking about hydrogen fusion power, which would have limitless sources of energy 60 years ago. And we're still relying on tech from 120, 30 years ago. They've got hydrogen fusion, they've got lots of other fusion as well. We just won't give it to the public. Thus, it's no longer possible to relegate considerations of climate control to the fantasies of science fiction on this account. It has now become necessary for us to recognise the realities and potentialities of modern science for what they are and what they can mean for the possibilities of climate control. Civil and military implications. The impasse of the successful achievement of methods for the control of climate upon all types of human activities confounds the imagination. Slight amelioration of adverse precipitation or temperature regimes could result in the reclamation of vast territories for agriculture and many other types of human activities. Didn't work that way, did it? Is something that they knew 60 years ago. Desert areas which cover a large fraction of the Earth's surface are known in many cases to require only slight changes in moisture regimes to make them suitable for large-scale agricultural production. Like I said, you can change the desert back to an oasis fairly easily. They're just not interested. You know, was it Gaddafi who built a whole water plant? And what did the US military do? Bomb it. You know, I know they're planting loads of trees in the desert at the moment in Africa. I think it's a few million trees, if memory serves me correctly, which will induce moisture. You know, that once it starts working, they'll send in the clowns again and smash it all. That's what they do. Small changes in circulation regimes could bring about the moderation of severe temperature climates to yield additional areas suitable for human habitation. Severe temperature climates. Such changes in circulation regimes can also affect the normal paths of destructive storms like hurricanes, such that their destruction energies could be dissipated in regions far removed from major human activities. So they knew back in the 60s they could disrupt hurricanes. So if they can disrupt it, they can drive it. Changes in atmospheric circulation regimes would have marked effects upon oceanic circulations, with the consequent changes in the abundance and location of fertile fishing grounds. Moderate changes in climate characteristics will have serious repercussions for all aspects of industrial activity. Militarily, a climatic control capability raises the possibility of a total new type of warfare. This type of warfare can be termed geophysical warfare, in which our ability to control the weather environment can be used as a weapon. This geophysical weapon will be unique in character in that it can be used in both hot and cold struggles. You know, they have what's called a hot war and a cold war. Both are fake. It can be used to affect any enemy adversely or benefit a friend. As a function of the nature of the control capability, the use of such a weapon could be a determining factor in the success of national military operations. As a hot war weapon, it would be best to have a strong control capability for specific areas and specific periods of time. Since we are talking about intermediate and long period climate control, this would imply a conflict of considerable duration. I told you that you don't go into regions for one or two reasons. There's always more. That tells you. Maybe this would imply a conflict of considerable duration to control their climate. Was it Afghanistan, 19 years, 18 years, Iraq, 16 years. Getting the picture now? Specific military consequences of such a control capability would be in the potential for destruction of an enemy's food production capability, thereby weaken his total military power, and also in the derangement of transportation systems and other industrial activities which might result from a marked change in climatic conditions. As a Cold War tool, the capability of climate control would place in the hands of this government a tool for ameliorating the weather conditions in friendly and uncommitted nations as a means of strengthening bonds with that country. So if you don't do this, we're going to mess with your weather. That's what they're saying there. Conversely, as a Cold War weapon, a climate control capability provides for a unique surreptitious means for weakening a potential enemy so that he does not have the capability to wage a hot war. The general study of the feasibility of climate control, independent of the use of this capability in either hot or cold conflicts, provides necessary national insurance if other nations achieve a control capability. Such a capability in either friendly or unfriendly hands represents a threat of weather conditions that might adversely affect the welfare of our nation. Like no other nation's important, it seems. As an absolute necessary countermeasure, this country must have within its scientific arsenal the knowledge of how to combat any such attempts to control by any of the nations. Failure to undertake a consistent programme at this time might provide the knowledge necessary to combat such climate control operations on the part of other nations and could lead to another Sputnik situation. And there you have it. There's a load of technical BS that follows that, but it's it's unbelievable. This is Langley again. How many more times is that 3 letters going to come up involved in skullduggery? Perhaps we'll have a song for them. Hi all and welcome back. Like I said, that document was 1960. And the gist of it is, it's yet again technology being weaponized. Technology per se is not bad, but the way the idiots in control of this planet, which is rapidly diminishing, everything with technology is weaponized. Otherwise they don't release it. Computers, high-speed computers in 1960, which they said they'd had for 2 decades, and yet it was near 60 years later we got desktops. Like I've said all along, there is no new technology. It's all old. They just introduce it when they want to weaponize it. As revealed in Stark Reality on last Tuesday's From Russia with 7, about the infiltration of the agencies in mainstream media, and the revelation that nearly 40 years ago there was over 400 CIA agents assigned to the media and tasked with providing information to the mainstream media, and as it's stated in the document, with the sole purpose of shaping public opinion. They cared not whether it contained a shred of truth. Most of it doesn't. is just a story and another group or country to target with their propaganda. You know, a word that they created, Langley, or OSS, like cognitive dissonance and also conspiracy theory or theorist, all to deflect people off their path. You know, and as Langley agent L2, Pompeo stated recently, we lied, we cheated and we stole. All in their own words. And that man's still in a job. Where's the consequences? So does anyone really think for 1 second that they're not heavily involved in the alt media propaganda? Because if you do at this point, you really need to realign your thinking to what being awake is about. Randy and I have been given a fair amount of flack over the last 6 or so years for outing certain people within the community, which over time we were proven correct over many of those that got outed. But as one is exposed, a replacement is always waiting in the wings to disrupt, distract and distort. You know, I wish it wasn't the case. So does Randy. And we have more alt media personalities operating in the right way. But it is what it is. But things have come up this week that I felt I need to address a whole heap of them. And the next 3 or 4 pieces will all be in that field. It's important these get outed and why. There'll be questions during it for you to make your own mind up on it. Like I said, time always tells. So we have a plethora of ex-military, ex-CIA and ex-NSA people in the alt media. We've got Mossad agents, Langley 2 agents, and then you've got Thomas at American Intelligence Media. He is ex-NSA and has a cat picture as his logo. Stephen D. Kelly, ex-CIA and ex-NSA also. And he has a cat picture on his website and calls his show Truth Cat Radio. Do people not think that is kind of odd in and of itself? Robert David Steele, ex-CIA, involved in NATO and the British establishment, and people trust these people and not question whether they are disinfo or faction-based. So Stephen Kelly, ex-CIA and ex-NSA, did another video this week on the death of Mike Ringley, who ran what was Revolution Radio, which was popular about a decade ago, which involved Kerry Cassidy amongst others. Now Kelly himself was also involved in Revolution Radio, but he left rather suddenly due to some not too well explained reason, given his short video presentation he gave this week, full of innuendo, ums and pauses. Now during that video he cites Kerry Cassidy, Bill Ryan, Wilcock, Ringley, Loren Fenton, Gilliland and Mars Johnson have been involved in some sort of child and porn distribution ring, along with several others. But his real piece was to trash Randy Morgans again, with a topic that Randy has covered and explained in great detail of how this was done and who were behind it. And it was not him. This is not a new subject. This is from 6 years ago. In fact, it was going on 8 years ago. Now, there was evidence that I received outside of Randy and others, which I cannot confirm whether it's correct or not, that stated that Kerry Cassidy, which is a stage name, and remember, she was involved in Hollywood, which may or may not give you a clue, was making a lot of money via porn connections on her website, as well as being paid by the Bilderbergers group back in 2013. Now, whether the two are connected or correct, I don't know. But Randy's being targeted heavily now for having the audacity to do his own investigations, which he always does, makes his own mind up, and in part supports the trust and what THI are doing. This goes against the rest of the alt media paid agents of doing everything to block what we're doing. That's the only reason for it. All the loop agents are coming back now to cause issues. You all know the names. It's what they do, or what they're told to do. They're no different to the portal people in essence. They're past scripts to say on shows or blogs, which make statements, but is drastically short on facts or proof. Just statements. But let's run a hypothetical scenario, shall we? Which for the hard of hearing means it's not real. But should an independent investigator take up this porn on a server case and look into the facts, perhaps he or she may come to a certain conclusion. Now, the NSA is part of the old control system and trying with the CIA to create a new control system. We all know that. The NSA, we know, is involved heavily in computers, computer programming, meta and data collection, and gaining access into all people's computers with the purpose of spying on us all. That's all been revealed. We know what they do. Now, given they're part of the control system, what if they, either the CIA or the NSA, determine a target or a group of targets and employ one of their field agents to disrupt or target that group? Having worked in that agency, they will be familiar with computers and programming. The agent sent to target then joins the group, becomes part of the group, which in agency speak is called inserting the asset. Then when the agent achieves what it's assigned to do, the agent leaves the scene, in some cases fairly quickly if they've been rumbled. Sometimes the agent is there to garner information, sometimes to take people out, sometimes to plant evidence so that their targets are implicated. I think most people would agree with that assessment of how agency people work. So with that in mind, let's look at the facts. A man joins a group and suddenly there's evidence of criminality, and said man leaves the group very quickly. The man is then questioned on why he left and is not very fluent in his speech on reasons for leaving. I'm sure the average FBI agent would deduce the same conclusion. Why is this man not clear on his reasons for leaving when criminality has allegedly been uncovered? And I'm sure the FBI agent would drag that person in for further questioning, would he not? Then the FBI guy would find out that the man in question worked for the CIA and the NSA, and then questions the man. And one of his first questions would be was there evidence of criminality before he joined or only during? And at which point he departed. Further questions would be, was this an undercover job? And so what was his role and purpose as an undercover agent? Fair assessment? You decide. And if you're looking for more evidence, try this next piece. This was a post by Tyler Durden of Zero Hedge. And he said, it sheds a whole new light on just how deeply interwoven the social media monoliths and the deep state truly are. The senior Twitter executive with editorial responsibility for the Middle East is also a part-time officer in the British Army's Psychological Warfare Unit. Remember that term, psychological warfare, it will come up again soon. And it was established by a group called the Middle East Eye. Now apparently Gordon Macmillan, Twitter's head of editorial for Europe, the Middle East and also Africa, not only works for the British government, but he is a reservist in the 77th Brigade. And in case you didn't know what the 77th Brigade is, it is a counter-intelligence unit set up to combat disinformation on social media. Oops. So not only are the agencies involved, but the military are involved as well. And they're there to spread pro-Western propaganda on Twitter and also Facebook. Now the unit was announced in 2015 in response, you can imagine, to a series of losses on the information warfare front, mainly in regards to Syria and Ukraine. Well, Tyler, it's not just that they're losing there, they're losing the information war on all levels. And I mean all levels. They can't control it. Now, The Guardian reported at the time, the British Army is creating a special force of Facebook warriors skilled in psychological operations and use of social media to engage in unconventional warfare in the information age. Now, I remember covering that story because I think we were still in Cosmic Voice then. Whereas Sky News said, using creative thinking, it is hoped that the 77th Brigade will influence the minds and shape the behaviour of the enemy and the local populations. And people think this is just the enemy is, let's all point out, and it's some other country. Remember, these people class us as enemy as well. That's why they spy on us. And this had led to the early nickname Twitter Troops for the brigade, which will be formally created on April the 1st. No surprise they did that. April 1st launch day is not a coincidence, as it's also known as April Fool's Day. So if it gets uncovered, they then can turn around and say it was all a joke. That's how they work. Now, America has its own unit, which was launched in 2011. Not a surprise, that either. Israel has one too. And these are not state secrets, but widely reported. And now you know why me has said all along that most on the internet from around 2011 and 2012 was pure bullshit and distraction. America launched its own in 2011. That's when it all started to go really sideways. Documents would go missing, sites would go missing. This has gone on the last 8 years. And in came the personality clowns. You all know who that is. And it was revealed, US spy operation that manipulates social media was the headline back in 2011. US spy operation that manipulates social media. And Britain launched said this soldiers familiar with social media sought for the 77th Brigade, which will be responsible for non-lethal warfare, which equates to mind control and propaganda. Israel started it in 2009 with a headline which reveals absolutely everything as to what these people are about. Quote, Israel recruits army of bloggers to combat anti-Zionist websites. Not to protect the Jewish people, oh no, but Zionists, which are nothing to do with Israel at all. In their own words, Israel recruits army of bloggers to combat anti-Zionist websites. Another one that's involved in the alt media, I decided to do a small piece on also. Steve Bazenik, or Pick Zenik. I'll call him Steve. It's easier to say. Born in Cuba, born to Jewish parents. Then moved to France, and then emigrated to the US and moved to New York. A Harvard-trained psychiatrist, and then obtained a doctorate at MIT. And after being drafted, Steve says the Navy then assigned him to St. Elizabeth's Hospital Insane Asylum, where he oversaw several wards of criminally insane patients. So you think, well, he's going to assess them because he's a psychiatrist. Whilst working there, he ordered a patient a lobotomy, which ended up killing the man. Now, apparently this man was born in the asylum, and an autopsy revealed that the man only had half of his brain to begin with. What happened to the other half is anyone's guess. I think you can gather. But the question is, how and why would a psychiatrist order a lobotomy? What type of institution was this? So we have psychiatry, and he was also involved in mental hospitals to date. And given some of the experimentation mentioned in MKUltra, it doesn't augur too well. But let's see where it goes. Steve was Deputy Assistant Secretary for Henry Kissinger. Also Cyrus Vance and James Baker. And his expertise includes foreign policy, international crisis management, and psychological warfare. Psychological warfare added to the list now. In 1974, he joined the United States Department of State as a consultant to help in the restructuring of its offices for the prevention of terrorism. And we all thought that started in the 2000s. By 1976, he was now a specialist on hostage taking. In 1978, Steve was known as a psychiatrist and now also a political scientist in the US Department of State. Quite a flexible guy. But then Steve took another turn. He acquired another specialist position, this time as a special envoy for President Jimmy Carter to Italy, to assist in the search for Italy's Prime Minister Aldo Moro. Steve, now described as an international crisis manager and hostage negotiator in the State Department, said the committee was jolted into action by the fear that Moro would reveal state secrets in an attempt to free himself. Why would an American be interested in an Italian revealing state secrets? And what were they frightened he was going to reveal? Steve said that Moro, quote, had been sacrificed for the stability of Italy, which in our terms means he was taken out, as that person was not playing the agency game, as the next line will reveal. Moro's eventual assassination has been attributed to the CIA as part of Operation Gladio. Oh my. And there you have it. As explained in From Russia with Love 7, which Operation Gladio, like Condor, was done by the CIA and the P2 Lodge, known as Propaganda Due. And it's all about shutting people down. Steve said it himself. Moro was sacrificed for the stability of Italy. Then in 1979 he resigned as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State over the handling of the Iranian hostage crisis. In 1980, he wrote an article for the Washington Post in which he claimed to have heard a senior US official in the Department of State Operations Center give permission for the attack that led to the death of US Ambassador Adolph Dubs in Kabul, Afghanistan. You all know who did that. In 1982, Steve was mentioned in an article in the New York Times as a psychiatrist who treated CIA employees. No. Treated or actually worked for the CIA, given his previous role in Italy. You know how they love to cover their agents and their tracks up. Then in 2001, Steve operated as Chief Executive Officer of Strategic Intelligence Associates, which is a consulting firm. All very Robert David Steele, that to me. And these private intelligences are all still connected to the main hub of the CIA, Five Eyes, which is now No Eyes, and the NSA. And despite searching for that company, I found no evidence of this Strategic Intelligence Associates, only Strategic Intelligence and Associates Limited, which is a British-based company with people listed as shareholders with Middle Eastern people's names. Make of that what you will. As recently as October the 6th, 2012, Steve was listed as a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. Oops. Mysteriously, his name was removed from the Council of Foreign Relations roster sometime between October the 6th and November 18th of 2012. Why was his name removed? Was it possible to become an undercover agent in the alt media? Question mark. Then in early 2013, he made a foray into the alt media and went on Alex Jones' channel. You decide. I was going to end there, and then I found something else that has to be addressed, which will complete the alt media clown game. Matt and Megan again. Known as the Divine Ms. M and Mary Magdalene, and Matt now goes as Matthias Imhotep, and also Thomas, who was Jesus' brother. And if you can get past that level of sanctimonious, highfalutin, I'm all important bullshit, then they have a new website that has all the hallmarks of clown operations and actually reveals who they're working for. The website is called Omni-Fi. Omni means all. Phi, going along with sci-fi, means fiction. So their title means all fiction. It talks of a global grid of communications, mentions the term decentralize, both of which was covered in the Clowns in Panic Facebook Libra coin show. Selling gold back, not gold coins, gold back coins. Reserve coins, are they federal? And AI blockchain. Launching in November, they say, is Gaia Tokens, the first digital currency that goes beyond gold back coin. Gaia Pay as a merchant app allows any natural reserve asset to be used as currency. Okay. They go further. Launching in December this year, smartphones. Next generation. Where have we heard that term before? Super smartphones that are 5 years ahead of all the rest, with technologically advanced features such as a battery the size of a speck of dust that lasts a whole year, they claim. Via the global mesh grid. I hope you grasp that. The global mesh grid. Sounds like a new veil to me. But here's the kicker. And this will send certain members and alt media scurrying to the hills with claims that we're all going to die again. The phones that they're putting out uses not 5G, but 6G. Ooh, we're all going to die. They're also advertising electronic intelligence, in other words, AI. HoloWeb Super Search, which will be ran by Amazon, and no doubt will be 10 times worse than Go Ogle. They're going to bring out e-commerce social media, which means loads more adverts and you have to pay for it. You will hear this term often, used twice in op-eds tonight. Meta. Showing or suggesting an explicit awareness of itself or oneself as a member of its category is the definition for Meta. They are launching the Meta Cloud, Super Cloud all in one. Master Media Vault and Network. And if you haven't caught on to who and what is all behind this yet, the final category in their Meta Cloud is Intelligence OS, which is OS open source intelligence, as in OSINT, which is the same company as Robert David Steele again. Oh my. So now you all know as to why Kim dropped Megan from the team. She wanted to be with Matt, who is connected to Rogue Pentagon and the RV crew, and went off to sell sunshine in Sedona, in Mount, not Shasta, but Shyster. And contrary to popular opinion in the woo-woo New Age alt-media clowns, Mount Shasta is not a nice place to go. It's riddled with negative beings and rather not nice entities. We'll be back shortly. It's all a grand illusion. Hi all and welcome back. Sorry set of op-eds there in our own community. Well, you know, I would have loved to have been wrong of outing certain people, but over time, like I said, it is what it is. You know, these clowns will go to any length to retain control, and their desire to control the narrative over the last 4 or 5 years is rapidly dwindling, and they can't handle it. And this is why it's important the group stays together. I mentioned last week, they can't handle it. They can't handle people knowing more than they do, which you'll be staggered to know is correct. And I've seen comments in the chat and received a few emails last week. Apologies if I haven't answered your emails this week. I've just had too much to do with From Russia with Love 7 and this show, and a few other things that we were involved in this week. But there's a lot of THI members are now meeting up, and some are making more direct connections, which is, from my perspective, is fantastic to hear. You know, this is what this group is really all about. You know, funding will be nice, but it's lower down the list in the broader scheme of things. You know, it is and has been noted of how our group has come together, that has spanned time zones and cultures and languages, and people coming together and supporting each other, learning new things, embracing them, is why THI exists. So I want to thank you all for taking part in it and going some way to fulfilling my vision of a load of people coming together for the right reasons and the right path. And so to me, that's wonderful to hear. So please keep it going. But there's something I've been pondering rather hard on in the past week. I thought I'd put it in the show for people to ponder on. If rabbits were killed off due to myxomatosis because it was being harmful to humans, why did cats survive a culling due to toxoplasmosis disease, which is even more harmful to humans?
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
I had to throw that one in. From the grand illusion, we're going to go to the grand delusion. This is a piece that came out this week, and it's far more serious than people would look at closely, but we will. Now, on September the 25th, which is the 5,780th anniversary of the day, which Jewish tradition holds the world was created 5,780 years ago. Ignoring the fact that Göbekli Tepe is at least 11,000 years old. So the world and man was created according to Jewish history around 5,780 years ago, and yet within 200 years, hunter-gatherer people built the pyramids. And yet 5,500 years later, we can't build them to that position. And they expect people to believe that? It's conspiracy theory at its finest. But the Sanhedrin, they with the black and white checkered floor, was holding a conference for the emerging organisation of 70 nations. The conference will culminate in an animal sacrifice made by representatives of the nations on the Mount of Olives, which is actually in Jordan, in which they will renew the covenant made by Noah upon leaving the ark. The conference will begin on Wednesday evening, September the 25th, the 25th day of the Hebrew month of Elul, at the Jerusalem Gate Hotel, and continue until Friday, September the 27th. Lectures and discussions will focus on the Noahide obligations incumbent upon all of mankind. Really. Also discussed will be the universal economic, cultural, educational that should be the focus of such an organisation. They state it's not to worship idols. I have a feeling they'll get contradictory shortly. These are the 7 Noahide obligations: not to worship idols, not to curse God, to establish courts of justice, not to commit murder, not to commit adultery, bestiality or sexual immorality, not to steal, not to eat flesh torn from a living animal. A major focus will also be the establishment, listen closely, of an international court based on Bible principles. Based on whose Bible? Don't say. And then they went on. God established the borders of the world based on the 70 children of Israel. Really? So God drew lines on a map to divide people, did he? Is that what he's saying? Who went down to Egypt, and the 70 nations that came out from Noah. The concept of 70 nations also appears in reference to the 70 oxen offered in the temple throughout Sukkot, the Feast of the Tabernacles, which the Talmud, Sukkah 55b, teaches offer the merit of the 70 nations. What are these 70 nations? When we were told God only chose one in all the books. And the question remains is God planning global expansion programs? The first day of the conference will end with a joint prayer by all participants. Rabbi Hollander, the Sanhedrin's foreign minister, has been tasked with composing the unique prayer for the special occasion. This is the same Sanhedrin, according to the books, that condemned the so-called Son of God to death, known as Jesus. Religion is a difficult word, Rabbi Hollander said. Quote, an individual does not need a religion to relate to God. Good start. And take note of that statement, because I'm certain, given our recent theme of contradictions, will unfold shortly. Next quote, Adam did not need religion to speak to God, because Adam was created by the fake gods is why. Fact. They go on. Religion is an activity that a community does together. Nations were established with Noah. I thought he said it was established by God in the last paragraph. Or does that mean that Noah is God now? And then there became a need for religion. Here we go. We need to come together as distinct nations and religions. Distinct means defined and separate from others. Does it not? A nation has the attributes that define it, but it also needs a religion. And there you have it, all in a few paragraphs. On the one hand, he starts off saying, you don't need a religion, and now you do. Confused you? Rabbi Hollander said, suggesting that the United Nations lacked this attribute, an organisation of nations necessarily needs to be religious. 70 nations under God, but not any specific common religion. So what's he suggesting now? Is he suggesting a reduction of nations under the banner of UN? What happens to the rest? The ceremony will renew the covenant made between mankind and God at the time. Which God are you referring to? Covenant, which like the word testament, means to bind. Why would God bind us? And bind us like the sacrificial offerings before being put in the fire, is what he's saying. Or is it covenant or ant coven? What he's really saying here, and he won't use the word, they're talking about renewing the covenant of Solomon, not Noah, and bringing the demons back. That appears intrinsically linked to this one group of people. And I can assure you all that that covenant and those entities will not be renewed or returning. And these people best be careful what they ask or induce going forward, as there will be consequences for their actions. I want to make that quite clear. Rabbi goes on, I now establish my covenant with you and your offspring to come, and with every living thing that is with you, birds, cattle, and every wild beast as well. Well, when you consider in the Talmud, non-Jewish are declared as beasts. In the Black Law Dictionary, humans means monster. Who wrote that? And of course, education means training of animals. So when he's talking about every wild beast, he's talking about us. And all that have come out of the ark, every living thing on earth. The ark was a craft. It's covered in the 100 series. And it's no coincidence that the name of the craft was Polaris. Where is Polaris in the constellation terms? Ursa Minor. Oops. I will maintain my covenant with you, he says. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood. Interesting terminology, that. I guess they just save that for the sacrifices, as all the flesh is cut off the animal or the child before they're set on fire. And never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth, he said. Well, given it was the so-called gods who delivered the flood, essentially what they're saying is, as long as you stay bound to their undeterminable God and his covenant, you won't drown again. This sacrifice made by Noah was a korban with a K, olah, a sacrifice that goes up, a tribute to God that was entirely burnt on the altar. The word for altar is sacrifice. Why do we have altars in churches if its root meaning is sacrifice? The rabbi goes on, just as Noah was not Jewish, oh my. No, he was Anunnaki, that's why. But was a servant of God, yes, the Lord. This ceremony is a declaration that mankind is serving Hashem, God, literally the name. Hashem appears as the new name along with Jehovah, Yahweh, Tetragrammaton, Noah, Adonai. All too common of name changes amongst the people who follow this cult. And it is a cult. Malakovsky becomes Netanyahu. Lenin was Ulanov. Bauer became Bayer, both of which are Rothschilds. Rabbi Weiss went on and explained, the altar must be built and the sacrifice made by someone from the nations who keeps the 7 Noahide laws. Like I said, why do we need an altar? Which means sacrifice. Surely we've developed sufficiently to see through that illusion that we must kill animals or people as sacrifices to the gods. But what he's telling you here is they will build the 3rd temple, which is actually the 4th temple. His story, unable to count as well as unable to tell the truth. That sacrifice centre, which is what a temple is, will not be allowed going forward. This is a religious act, but not for any specific religion, Rabbi Weiss said. This is a meta-religion. Told you you'd heard it again. Not a global religion, which is inherent in every person and expressed in his own way. The world needs to return to religion. Rejecting religion, rejecting God, is a sickness that is afflicting the world. So again, having said we don't need a religion, now he says we do, using the term meta, which means about, after, beyond, and amongst. Like metadata, which means data about data. So meta-religion means religion about a religion. Does that make any sense? But it's not a global religion. Well, it can't be, because he stated earlier it was only for 70 nations. when there are 209 nations in the world? What are they going to do with them? You know, these people talk shit and in complete riddles. And these ceremonies are stated as sacrifices to atone for their sins. Why is a poor animal or child, in some cases, as covered in the From Russia with Love series, responsible for this Jewish cult crimes? Does anyone sit down and think and ask, why are others made to end their lives because of the misdemeanors of themselves? You know, the same applies to the whole Jesus narrative. He died for our sins, they say. Why did Jesus get sacrificed when he didn't commit the crimes or sins? You know, what type of phony logic is applying here? And do these people understand or comprehend exactly what they're saying? Clearly not. But I wonder what would happen if THI created a religion and all members declared their sins and then offered up the Rothschild family as a sacrifice. Sounds good to me. Whether most people would think that was acceptable? Most would probably say no. And yet this whole religion is based on that very concept and is lost to most people, including the Jewish people. You're being duped. Endless karma, sacrifice. Teaching the world needs a religion, and yet they are the most secluded group of people on the planet. Teaching their children, if you're not following Yahweh, Torah or the Talmud, then those are not real people and are just animals. I mean, what type of values in life is that teaching their children? When I had the job in Florida, we had kosher people who come to Florida in April. I presume there's some sort of Jewish holiday. And they covered all the toilets, the handles, the faucets, and any other stationary object to avoid touching anything that a non-Jew has touched. You know, what type of bullshit behaviour is that? You know, if it was basic cleanliness, I could perhaps understand, but every single family that left the house left it completely trashed, of which I had to clean up. Just trashed the whole house. I hate to say it, but they act like pigs. And one has to ask, if you're God's chosen ones, did he tell you to behave in that manner as well? Let's get into some word magic, shall we? You do realise the term scapegoat came into existence as it's a Jewish sacrifice term. As mentioned earlier, someone else pays for their crimes and sins, hence the scapegoat. That's where it came from. The ceremony is called Korban Olah. Korban means to draw close. Olah means Holocaust. Holocaust means religious animal sacrifice by fire. So Korban Olah means to draw close the Holocaust of sacrificing by fire. The Holocaust term didn't start in World War II. That was 600 years ago. In fact, the term Holocaust didn't come in until 1958, or 56, over a decade after the war. The nascent Sanhedrin released a declaration to the 70 nations for Hanukkah to be read at a ceremony in Jerusalem on the last day of the holiday. The ceremony will include the consecration of a stone altar prepared for use in the third temple. The declaration is intended as an invitation to the nations to participate in the temple and to receive its blessings. Neither their covenant with Solomon's demon or the third or actual fourth temple of sacrifice will be allowed, and anyone supporting it will be cast in the same light as these people. Loving demons, I'm loving angels instead. Hi all. Final piece tonight. There was another one, we'll save that to next week. It's just staggering, that last piece. I'm calling on all the good Jewish people to stand up, because they will sacrifice you again. They sacrificed you in World War II. These people are nothing to do with being Jewish. Zero. Did you know, just like a roundup of From Russia with Love 7 in many aspects, our world is only 5% developed. Only 5%. America pretty much also. 5%. Between 5 and 10 anyway. And yet for the past 100 years, we have knocked it down and rebuilt it. Mainly due to war. Or because certain private contractors get all their funding that way. Imagine what we could achieve if that trash and rebuild process was eliminated. You know, as covered in Tuesday's show, this is a scam of massive proportions, where an inner circle connected to the CIA, Five Eyes, NATO, are all passing bogus information around the world to self-generate their own programs, create their own contracts, and collect all the funds associated with it. Look what happened in Iraq. They bombed it into oblivion, and then clowns in America, CIA, brought in their own contractors to rebuild it, likes of Halliburton, Bechtel and others. Does anyone ask, why are we rebuilding their country? Think logically. You go to war in some country for whatever reason. But did the Romans, the Dutch, the British rebuild the towns that they destroyed? It defies all logic. And yet so few ask, why are we rebuilding Iraq? And more importantly, why are we not rebuilding our own country? Because these private contractors connected to Langley are creaming all the funds is why. You know, the whole thing's beyond bizarre. That requires vast quantities of funds that belongs to the American people, which the American people have largely forgotten. Governments and banks don't have money, they have ours. And yet no one or too few asks, why are we doing this and who is responsible for it? Well, clearly after the last show, now you know why. So how does it work? Well, you have corrupt agencies passing bogus information based on a narrative designed to deliver a solution they require. It's passed on to governments and media to garner the reaction from the public The reaction then, public, requires them to provide the solution they wanted. And off we go to war. The Iraqis did 9/11. No, they didn't. Did Afghanistan do it? No, they didn't. Except over the past 4 or 5 decades, which we covered some of the laws, with new laws passed, they just bypassed due process and cut out the politicians altogether. Politicians who, I might add, are clueless and know less of what is and has gone on than the average alt media person. It's all compartmentalised, you see, and politicians are the bottom 1%. Deep state, military and agents are the bottom 5 to 10% maximum. Puppets. And these programs are based on population reduction to cover up previous scandals, Operation Gladio, hello, acquiring of resources to then fund other programs, regime change to install their own puppets, which is Operation Condor, receptive to their levels of depravity and corruption. And it involves the military, science, big pharma, agency intelligence, and world-based agencies, private groups operating under the fake banner of security. Churches, charities, banks and secret think tank groups are all in on it. The CIA, which is a front for OSS, SS being the operative word, or letters, who are a front for the Vatican, who are a front for the Zionist, communist, Israelite people, masquerading as Jewish. The Jewish religion was their chosen faith to deliver their anti-life program globally, when in reality they are known as the Black Sun cult. They've told a whole heap of fake history with books barely believable to those who can actually think, created a program whereby one group is more special than the rest, the classic divide and conquer that, and caused untold suffering to people immersed into that religion, into a program that has rendered their peoples almost as pariahs in many countries. But like I keep saying, these people have been used, pushed into various countries globally by the puppet masters based on a completely fake history, and once sufficient numbers of Jewish people are installed in a region, then in comes the big boys and the programs that are created for them to follow, which largely means they take over the region's land, resources, businesses and banks, oblivious to the Jewish people, the average Jewish people by and large. And because of this hidden program, it is why and them who have suffered. Thrown out of 106 countries in the last 2,000 years, plagued with the guilt that it was they who killed the person known as Jesus, plagued with the guilt of known in some cases, denial in most, it was their own kind who killed them in World War II. The SS were all Jewish connected, as my series has proven. And I wish more were encouraged to learn more and embrace the knowledge. It will solve so many of the world's ills, where hate and division towards others are largely at the request of the system, blaming Jews for everything being one of them. Jews are just the front puppets, the sacrificial lambs, as it were, for a far larger program running in the background. Like I said, no one was born a Jew, a Catholic, a Muslim, or any other derivative of fake religions. That was given to you by non-taught parents in the system. No child should be born and branded by a religion. It's far damaging than many realise. The choice of religion, whether to participate or not, should be decided by the child when passing into adult at 18. That then becomes their choice. Currently, that choice is taken away by a non-sovereign programme, by millions of parents inserted into a programme that they're oblivious to all the consequences of. Our world is riddled with stupidity, naivety, and a basic lack of understanding of how life works or should be. And we have much work ahead to get anywhere near to what it should be. But thankfully, our members, along with Randy and Alan, have made a good start in thinking different. It is the key. We will not prevail copying old ways. All of it has failed, and all of it is collapsing. Final piece, which I have mentioned earlier, which is prevalent now. I see us as errant warriors. Errant in the sense that we are departing from a prescribed course. We cross a threshold, and then the fabric of events alters. The news is different. Solid becomes liquid, liquid becomes vapour, and vapour becomes open space or aether. That space is waiting for us to do something. The space has no plan. It is calm. The challenges we assumed were there are missing. Those challenges were the last meal we consumed on the last day of old time. Now we walk and look up at the night sky. We are satiated and satisfied. And now we can do something different. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. I'll see you next on Sunday with Randy and Alan. Bye for now.